Personalization plays, I think, a really important role in giving users the experience or better experiences that they're after. I think it's always true that content is king with any OTT platform or streaming platform, that the content is always going to dictate perhaps the success or failure.
Hi everyone, for today's episode of Retention Zone, I have the pleasure to have with me Stuart Huke from 24i. Hi Stuart.
Hi, Carl, how are you doing?
So tell me a bit about Stuart then first.
Oh yeah, so my name is Stuart Huke. I work for a company called 24i. 24i is a streaming specialist offering a range of different solutions for streaming OTT and broadcasters, pay TV, from both app delivery and back-end content management. Myself, I've been in the industry well over 20 years from a variety of different roles. But data has always played a big part in my career. And so I've got a big passion for analytics, understanding user behavior. And as I've moved into now product solutions, it's very interesting to see how the streaming industry in itself has sort of moved towards sort of understanding how to more so retain users now that focus is become onto retention. So just to talk more about that today.
Yeah, amazing. And good shout out to the name of the podcast. Thank you. So I think it's always good to start with a bit of, what is your view of the current situation in streaming video very quickly, and then we go more in the product side of things.
Yeah, I think the market's definitely been a challenging year, but there's, I think, a lot of consolidation in the marketplace, but still lots of opportunity. I think with the advance of FAST being very, coming across, obviously very big in America, but obviously now going in more into Europe and Asia. I think it's really interesting to see the different strategies that even the smaller operators are challenging. But I think the main thing that I've been hearing a lot about is how to really retain a lot of the users that all these different platforms have managed to collect over recent years. And with the advent of more choice, that's becoming even more challenging, I think, than it ever was before. So it's definitely a marketplace where I think we're seeing lots of questions from clients about different strategies and different approaches to how to do that better.
Yeah, it's true that churn is the scary monster of our age, I would say. And I know that I like a lot that you started saying I always had a passion for data analytics, and I kind of consider like a naive data freak myself. So I spent a lot of time in creating dashboard and playing with that a lot through the years. What is your approach as a product person to solve the churn problem, or in any case to increase engagement? I know you have kind of a very specific angle on that.
Yeah, I think obviously personalization plays, I think, a really important role in giving users the experience or better experiences that they're after. I think it's always true that content is king with any OTT platform or streaming platform, that the content is always going to dictate perhaps the success or failure of how you get users to come to your platform. But in that essence as well, I think it's really important that users have so much choice these days that you have to make it as relevant as possible at every touch point that user has with your service. So I think it's really interesting how the market dynamic has shifted in terms of that whole perception of whether personalization is something that is a nice to have versus a necessity. And I think the market slowly understood that it has become a necessity in this battle to retain eyes on your service, but also accept that you're not the only service that user is going to be visiting. So it's how do you get them to come back to you? How do you get them to come back, even if it's infrequently? How do you get them to stay for longer and really make the most of that monetizing that user as much as possible? And I think that's it's never an easy thing. For me, it's something that never sleeps. It's a constant battle. Users have so much choice that I think it's one of those things where you have to keep iterating, keep testing, keep redeveloping your strategy, and it's something that definitely needs consideration. Lots of consideration over time, for sure.
when you say personalization, in specifically human personalization of the just to be a bit technical in UX terms of the discovery experience, do you think there is also something in the consumption part, something in more the customer relationship side?
Yeah, I think traditionally, I think it's always been seen to be things just like, you know, what you'd call traditional algorithms, I guess, that do the things like recommended for you or because you watch those sort of classic things you see on screen. I think today, though, I think it's then how do you extend that across the whole experience? It's not just about on platform, it's off platform. It's registration process. It's any touch points you have with the user is a potential opportunity to give an additional layer of personalization. So whether that's connecting what users are doing on screen with what they're getting off screen. So whether it's in a marketing message, whether it's an upgrade message, whether it's a subscription message, I think there's always an opportunity for vendors and clients to think of new ways to make that experience more relevant to a user. And I think if you like, I think the streaming industry is playing catch up to what the e-commerce industry has been doing for many years. And I think the technology is there to do it. But I think it does need a change of focus, perhaps, in terms of a streaming business is understanding that the user experience, it starts and ends at every touch point, and how can they best have the best data strategy to take advantage of that and make sure they're taking advantage of all these different opportunities and touch points and communication points that a user has with your business.
Yeah, I think what you said about first the business model being more fluid, bring a lot of variety. I think it makes the direct-to-consumer marketing side so much more sophisticated, maybe much more similar to e-commerce, as you said. On the other end, exactly what you describe is kind of something I really was passionate about through the last years, is this combination of the marketing side and the product side. Because of that, to be much more a one team instead of saying, okay, we'll do some marketing and then you'll do the product. And we just meet annually to decide what feature we will launch, whatever, next season.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have experience with clients, and I saw it, I pushed it on this for a long time because I think it was crucial to the success.
Oh yeah, and I think it's not a criticism of any business either, because I think it's something that's actually very hard to do. But I think that's where analytics can really help, because analytics at the end of the day is that your eyes on what's going on in the business. So I think it's really important that businesses make sure that they have the right analytics and that they understand the data that they're looking at, but also that they can actually action on it. So I think it's interesting that generally when we look at our personalization analytics, it's very clear to see that the difference between how users behave when they interact with personalization. They stay longer, they watch more. Therefore, that in itself is a clear indication that you need to sort of think about that personalization strategy, all those different touch points, because it will have a positive impact on retention. And it's quite startling as well that you look at how users that interact with personalization are almost 2 to 3 times less likely to churn than those that don't. So when you see stats like that, I think it's really compelling. But also, I think it's really easy then for a product person or a marketing person to decide actually there's real evidence there that suggests if we do work together and actually think about these things in tandem, they can have some real positive business impact to performance.
And one last question, and this has been a very concrete, pragmatic conversation, so thank you, Stuart. I mean, if you look ahead, what is the feature that you want to focus on? What is the next level, if you have, I mean, whatever you can share, obviously.
Yeah, of course. And I think the next level is, I think generative AI has been a big buzzword in the industry for the last 12 months now, and its use case. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that manifests itself in the rest of the industry. But I also think it has to be done in a sensitive way that users don't become apprehensive about how its application on a streaming platform. And I think there's always a balance between making sure that a user feel comfortable with what they're seeing and how they're interacting with AI. But I still think there's some really interesting things that can be done. I think I'm a big advocate for the collection of more first-party data. I think Streaming platforms, I think, have a real opportunity to have more dialogue with users on a one-to-one basis and capture real intent and real information about users, where obviously in the past it's very much, a lot of the time it can be subjective in terms of, if someone's played an item, it's often assumed that they've liked that. But unless you actually capture that real desire that I really enjoyed that program, or that's something I really want to watch again, you can't be sure. You're always making somewhat of a guess. So I think there's a real opportunity for ad platforms to use AI to have that more granular interaction, and that doesn't have to come at a huge cost, I don't think, in terms of the sort of infrastructure cost of doing that. But I think it's more a case of then thinking about, if you are capturing that kind of information, how do you best use it, and how can you use it effectively? So whether that's by displaying better things on the front end, or is that you taking that information and making the experience off platform more tailored to that individual, or is it just making sure that if you are then feeding that through to a marketing team, how do they use that then when they're communicating with that individual, either through email or push or social channels? I think there's lots of different touch points, I think, where that sort of generative AI could have some real positive benefits.
One other question I wanted to ask is about the impact of device platform. So our user watching on a smartphone, then maybe on a tablet, then maybe on a big screen. How does it go in terms of personalization inside the logic?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think it's one where certain clients, so from what I've seen in terms of that sort of empirical evidence, is that there's certain streaming service that perhaps has certain content that lends itself more to certain device type behavior. So I think if you've got a content mix where you do have a lot of short form content, for example, then that lends itself more to sort of mobile consumption and perhaps more commute consumption, versus perhaps what you would see on a normal sort of big screen TV. So I think there you can then start to see distinct patterns of behavior, and can then start looking at segmentation based on both user groups, but also then device usage. But again, I think it comes back down to the type of content you have will often drive those strategies. I wouldn't say there's a one size fits all approach, because I think it just does depend on whether you're, say, a sports provider, or whether you're more into movies, drama series, or perhaps it's more documentaries, or it's more informational based. All the different content types, I think, then it does then massively depend on what's your preferred device, or perhaps the differences that you're going to use in terms of your content consumption. So I think it comes back down to understanding the data. Have you got the right data? Can you capture that information correctly? And then can you actually mine it correctly and actually see those patterns of behavior and then act on it? I think it's often very easy to have these brilliant ideas about how you're going to use it, but if you, in practical, as you say, in practical terms, that's not always the easiest thing to actually then structure a communication strategy around perhaps those different touch points you have.
So thank you, Stuart. It was super fascinating to talk to you, and have a good 2024, which is just started now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.